Good evening, everyone. My name is Ware Harmon, and I'm the Executive Director of Town Hall Seattle. And on behalf of our staff and our friends at the Elliott Bay Book Company, it is a pleasure to welcome you to tonight's presentation of Lynda Mapes, part of our Arno G. Matulski Science Lecture Series. And as we get underway, I want to acknowledge that our institution stands on the unceded traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, particularly the Duwamish. We thank them for our continuing use of the natural resources of their ancestral homeland. We're very glad to have you here with us tonight, whether you're here in the room or at home cozy by your digital hearth. The program will run around 60 minutes, including Q&A. To submit your questions for the Q&A portion of the event, we've adopted a new platform this year, I should say, that synthesizes the at-home and in-building experience. You can send your question to meet.ps/MAPES, or crazily hold your camera up and take a picture of that QR code, and it'll take you there immediately. You can also do that with your screen at home, if that makes it easier. The link will also be in the chat. And you should know that we can't guarantee we'll address every question tonight, but we'll get to as many as possible. For those of you who want to view the program with closed captions, click the CC button in the bottom right corner of the video player. That's for at-home people, obviously, unless you're using some sort of weirdo augmented reality situation here in the building. All right, Town Hall's adding, don't do that, please. Town Hall's adding new events and podcasts every day. Upcoming events include volcanologist Robin George Andrews on what major eruptions of the past can reveal about our future. And former UW Public Health Dean Howard Frumpkin on the science linking our own personal well-being to that of the planet. We'll also host the first concert in this year's Town Music Chamber Series, which Joshua Roman, our longtime artistic director, has declared will be his last. That sounds dramatic. He said it will be his last. And it will feature that first concert, that is, feature Joshua in performance with the genre-defiant Public Quartet. Also, this Wednesday, you won't want to miss a special live finale of our current podcast, Beasts of Seattle, curated and created by Samantha Allen, who will be joined by the renowned crow whisperer, Dr. John Marsluff, discussing Seattle's special relationship with these wily, persistent, and vaguely menacing creatures. Visit our website to join our email list and get the latest updates as more programs are added throughout the season. Town Hall's work is made possible through your support and the support of our sponsors. This Arno G. Matulski Science Lecture Series of ours is supported by Microsoft, but as most of you know, Town Hall is at heart a member-supported organization, and I want to thank all of our members joining us tonight here or at home. If you share Town Hall's goal of a community energized and empowered through dialogue around politics, science, and culture, please consider supporting us by becoming a member yourself. And finally, I'm not a betting man, but I'm pretty sure you're going to want to have your own copy of Lynda's beautiful new book. If you're watching from home, use the link in the chat, or if you're here right now in the room, visit the Elliott Bay table right over there to pick up your own copy if you haven't done so already. With all of that, journalist, author, explorer, and self-described reveler in the natural world, Lynda V. Mapes covers natural history, environmental topics, and issues related to the Pacific Northwest indigenous cultures for the Seattle Times, a position she's held since 1997. In addition to her decades of journalism, in 2014 and 15, she received a Charles Bullard Fellowship in Forest Research and spent a year in the Harvard forest exploring the human and natural history of a single 100-year-old tree. She produced a blog about the experience, as well as an old-fangled book entitled Witness Tree, published by Bloomsbury in 2017. Her latest book, Orca, Shared Waters, Shared Home, is the subject of this evening's discussion, talk, really. Please join me in welcoming Lynda V. Mapes.
Hi, everybody. Everybody hear me okay? Yes. Excellent, great. Well, it's a joy to be here tonight on a good night to be a salmon, or a good night to be an orca. I have to say, after last summer's drought and heat dome and everything else, I'm really reveling in all the rain. It's just fine. I think it's excellent. It's good for the fish. It's good for the orcas. So tonight, I want to thank you for coming out. I want to thank Elliott Bay Books for being here tonight. I'm, as a local author, incredibly fortunate to be employed at the Seattle Times, which has been a family-owned and locally produced newspaper for 125 years this year. And I feel just as lucky to be in a city that supports a venue like Town Hall for all of our local arts and culture, and bookstores like Elliott Bay Books. So we're fortunate indeed here in Seattle for those things. I want to tell you a little bit about what we're going to do tonight. I'm very proud of this book, Orca, Shared Waters, Shared Home. It is the product of years of research with the staff at the Seattle Times, which was the basis of the book. We produced special sections, 5 of them, called Hostile Waters. And, that really took so many people at the newspaper. Especially, I want to call out Steve Ringman, the photographer I worked with on Hostile Waters series, and also the graphic illustrator, Emily Eng. She's a fantastic scientific illustrator and artist. And we also created videos that are part of that presentation called Hostile Waters, which you can still find online if you look it up on the World Wide Web, seattletimes.com. Fantastic documentaries about the orcas, in addition to a lot of interactives and a truly immersive experience in the articles themselves. So do check that out. It's a great thing to share with students and a wonderful thing to share with your family. After we finished the series, we decided that we would do a book for the community that I like to call the director's cut. This is, we went deeper and further with the story of the orcas that frequent Puget Sound, the southern resident killer whales. And basically, what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to show you some of the photos from the book and talk a little bit about what is happening with the southern resident orcas, bring you up to date today on their status and what our concerns are, but also some of the hope that I feel profoundly is just absolutely not only essential to feel, but appropriate to feel with regard to this top predator that's been around ever since the ice melted back in Puget Sound. This is not some crybaby species. This is an incredible animal, one of the most intelligent, powerful animals on Earth, as are the salmon that they rely on. So we'll talk more about why I actually feel optimistic about the fate of this species and how you're involved in its recovery. I'm going to take your questions, absolutely, and I'm here for you. Anything's fair game. And I'm also going to show you a video that shows the orcas playing in Puget Sound. This is a special time of year, November and December. This is when the southern resident killer whales come here. They come chasing the chum, which is the second biggest salmon in the sea, all the way. Those chum, they're headed down to the Nisqually. They're headed to these Puget Sound rivers right now. And the southern residents, they come here hunting them. And so that's when we get to see them, right here in central Puget Sound. This is when the ferries stop and people go running out to the beach on Alki and on the Vashon and Maury Islands. And here's the miracle of these animals right here, downtown orcas. Who else has got that? So with that, let's get into it. So many of you probably first heard about the story of the southern resident killer whales with this particular southern resident killer whale. This is Telequa J35. And she burst into all of our worlds in the summer of 2018. And what happened was she did something that scientists know that very intelligent, socially connected animals such as giraffes and gorillas, dolphins will do when they lose a loved one, which is they will grieve and they will stay with that loved one. And what's going on in this photograph is Tahlequah is clinging to her baby calf. And this is a female that she gave birth to and it looked perfect, and she'd carried it for 18 months, but the animal lived only 1/2 hour. And she just refused to let it go. I'm going to point out where the baby is. As you can see, this is not her. This is the baby calf. And when I heard of Telequa and her journey of grief, I made a decision. We made a decision at the paper, which was we were going to stay with her during her witness. We were going to stay with her everywhere she went during that time and cover her story of what she was going through, what her whole family was going through. So at the Seattle Times, we got ourselves onto boats with scientists who were keeping track of her and stayed with her throughout that time. And this photograph that Steve Ringman took, we were out all day long to get one frame. This is the frame. In sunset light, in Canadian water, actually. And She was off by herself at that time. There were no other boats or any other people around, and we could really hear her labored breathing. We could see how she had to arch her back in a not usual way in order to keep going down and picking up this calf before the tide would carry it away. And it was so sad to think of her making that decision with each breath to go down and get it again. The calf is about 6 feet long and weighs about 350 pounds. So this is a lot of work for her. And she sometimes carried it balanced on her rostrum right here on her head. Other times, such as in this photograph, she's actually holding on to one of the pectoral fins ever so carefully in her teeth so as not to mar the baby. And to see her going through this, you know, you just had this sense, you heard her breath, you watched her work, you saw her holding on to the calf, and you just thought, what is she going to? What is she going to do? You know, how long will she carry it? Well, in the end, she carried it for 17 days and thousands of miles. And I don't think anybody expected that. Honestly, I don't think she ever dropped it. I think it just finally fell apart. And when that day came that she had finally dropped the calf and I wrote that story, there were 6 million people reading that story around the world. And I think I know why. You know, this wasn't just an animal story. This was a story about a mother who happened to be a whale. And anyone who'd ever lost anything, anyone that they loved, knew what she was going through. And so she was the whale who changed the conversation. You know, I think to a lot of people, orcas were just one more endangered species at that point. They were just sort of random black and white wildlife to a lot of people. They did not understand that what these are families, really close-knit families. The kids never leave the parents for life, which is pretty remarkable if you think about it. These families stick together lifelong. And not only that, but you can really think of these J, K, and L pods of the orcas that frequent Puget Sound as an ancient society. This is one of the oldest and most sophisticated societies in the animal world. They've been in these waters for 10,000 years. They have their own language. They have their own greeting ceremony. They have very distinct culture of what food is, salmon, and where and when to catch it. And so, you know, I think Telequa really changed the conversation about these orcas, that she helped people see them for what they are, which are families that were suffering and in deep trouble in home waters that have been their waters for some 10,000 years. So once she had the world's attention, we at the Seattle Times decided that we were just going to really stick with the story. We were going to stick with her. We were going to stick with the orcas and go everywhere that they'd go and understand and dig deeply to understand the roots of this extinction crisis. What was the problem? Why was this spectacular animal, a top predator in every ocean of the world as a species on our planet for 6 million years, why were they struggling to live right here in our home waters? So that's what we set out to learn, and we spent 18 months following the orcas from BC up in the Broughton Archipelago where they forage all the way down to California. They take fish out of a very, very broad area from rivers in Alaska all the way down to the Sacramento in California. And we were trying to answer this essential question. You know, you look at this beautiful scene. This is San Juan Island in the summer, Mount Baker in the background, and that orca is named Spock. That's a female orca. She surprised a lot of the scientists. She's so kind of big and hefty, they thought she was a male until she showed up with a calf. But you look at that picture and you think, well, what could be wrong? It just looks perfect, doesn't it? And so that was the goal, was to figure out why it was they were not persisting. And I think the other thing that we were very interested in is why their migratory patterns are shifting. This is the west side of San Juan Island, which really acts as a fish funnel. In summertime, the southern resident killer whales spend a lot of their time in the San Juan Islands because they're chasing chinook salmon, preferentially chinook, that's what they really want to catch, that are headed to BC's Fraser River. They don't come here to entertain us or the whale watchers. They come here because that's where the fish are. And everywhere in the world, they specialize in their diet, and they specialize in a diet that they know how to catch using the environmental features of where they live. This isn't just a southern resident thing. A lot of people say to me, well, they should just eat something else. They should switch. But that's not how it works. When you're an orca, you are what you eat. And for resident orcas, both northern and southern, that is salmon. They will eat other fish in winter. They'll take a lingcod, they'll maybe get a halibut, but it's salmon most of the time. And in summer, it's chinook. 98% of their diet is chinook in the summer. Why? Because it's the biggest fish in the sea and the most calories for the hunting effort. These orcas, the southern residents, are just one type of orca right here in our local waters, the Northeastern Pacific. They share these waters with two other types, the transient, so-called, or Biggs killer whales, which specialize in eating marine mammals. They won't eat a fish. No, they want a seal. They want a nice juicy seal, or they want a sea lion, or they want to go after a gray whale calf. And they're incredibly good at it. They'll gang up like a pack of wolves and go after even a 1,000-pound sea lion. They also share waters with the offshores. These are rarely seen orcas. They're way off on the continental shelf. They mostly eat sharks. And this is the key to one of the other really interesting things about orcas. They don't fight like we do between their societies. They eat different things. They've partitioned the resources of the region. And so they really don't interact at all. They don't interbreed. They don't interact. They don't mess with each other. They share the sea. And interestingly, in the southern resident clan, it's very profound how they will share food, especially the mother orcas will share their catch with their own young, but also other young in the pod. And these are matriarchal cultures. They're led by the females, especially the oldest females. They're the ones that carry that vast ecological knowledge of where salmon are. And particularly when the salmon runs are poor, that's when they'll really be the ones that take the lead. They'll be a mile ahead of the pod, leading them to fish. And so we were curious, why was it that really these orcas that for so long have had the habit of frequenting the west side of San Juan Island to get their food weren't really doing that anymore? We hear from people who live up there and scientists who follow them that they used to show up regularly in May, and they'd be there reliably through August. That's not true anymore. Now they'll maybe show up finally by mid-July, kind of look around and see if they can find anything to eat, and if not, they'll book it right out to the outer coast again. And mostly these are becoming increasingly coastal animals. They're spending their summers on the west end of the Strait of Juan de Fuca or even out on the outer coast because that's where the food is. And so the question was why? As with any scientific experiment, you always want a control group. You want that baseline about how they should be doing. Well, when it comes to the orcas that frequent Puget Sound, the southern residents, the closest thing to a control group is the northern residents. This is the very same animal. They have the same preference for eating salmon, but they live in a different place. They're up in the Broughton Archipelago. They're north of the Campbell River, Vancouver Island. And so we thought, okay, fine, we'll go up there and we'll see what life is like for them. Why is this population doing so well? They've been increasing steadily every single year, more and more and more. And they were always having offspring. And I think the first thing that happened when we went up there and saw this beautiful orca whale, first thing, as soon as we got off the shore and out onto the boat with Rob Williams of Ocean Research, and we weren't even trying to see orcas. We were just trying to get somewhere. But we saw orcas every single place we went. They were everywhere. It was a complete reset, really, of what normal is. I mean, we were used to, when we worked with scientists in the San Juan Islands, this big drama, oh, would we see orcas? Would they be there? Would we be able to photograph them? Would we be able to get any time with them? Up north, we saw them everywhere we went. And the other thing that we quickly learned when we went to see Paul Spong on Hansen Island, who runs Orca Lab, and we prowled around the landscape where he lives, is that these orcas that live up there in the northern realm, they live not just in another place, they live in another world. I mean, this is a tree that's growing behind Paul's lab, and this gigantic cedar, he calls the mother cedar. And this is the kind of intact forest that still exists up there. It's a much wilder place. And these northern resident orcas, they're living with many more varieties of fish, a greater quantity of fish, cleaner water, quieter water. And I think the thing that told us was that you know, these orcas, as long as they have what they need, they can do it. They'll do just fine. The northern residents also have some advantages that the southern residents don't have. They have a spot that's set aside just for them. It's a reserve. It's called the Michael Big Ecological Reserve. And there are beaches there that the orcas love to rub against. They'll push all the air out of their lungs and they'll scooch up onto the beach stones and scratch their tummies. It's just something they enjoy doing. And it's a place where they like to just hang out, and there's a lot of play, and there's a lot of sex. It's just kind of orca spa time. And this place is just for them. No people are allowed to go there, not even kayakers. And the southern residents don't have anything like that. They don't have a place that's just for them. I think the other thing that we felt was really important to dig into was the history of our own relationship with this species. These are Namu's teeth. And they're at the Burke Museum. And Namu was the world's first captive killer whale, captive performing killer whale. And he was captured by Ted Griffin of Washington State up in where the northern residents live. And in fact, Namu was a northern resident. And Ted Griffin ran an aquarium on the waterfront. And he was an animal collector, and he was really interested in getting an orca because nobody had ever had one. So he put the word out there for his collection, and in fact, he even passed the hat on the waterfront. And these waterfront businesses really wanted him to get an orca because they figured, well, if he did, that'd be great for them. So, you know, Ivar's, acres of clams, all these waterfront businesses, and he filled up a knapsack with cash, answered the call from a fisherman up there who accidentally caught an orca in his net, went up there and got it and brought it back to the Seattle waterfront, towing it in a homemade sea pen behind a tugboat. And thousands of people turned out on the Deception Pass Bridge to watch this spectacle of a tugboat pulling a live orca whale in Puget Sound. And Ted Griffin brought Namu to the waterfront, and he was greeted as a hero. He was greeted by the mayor and given the key to the city. I mean, it was a very different time. People thought what he had done was fabulous, and thousands of people showed up to watch this captive performing killer whale. And at that time, you know, orcas were thought of as these vicious killers, just relentless predators. They were not liked at all. They were reviled, and fishermen shot them on sight. And then suddenly here's Ted Griffin getting in the pool with this orca whale. And not only is the orca whale not attacking him, he's enjoying being brushed with a brush. And he lets Ted Griffin ride him like a little horse. And he takes a salmon right from his hand, and he bounces a ball with his nose. Now, obviously, the orca is completely starved for company. The only thing he's got is Ted, and he completely latches onto him. And so people's opinion of this animal would completely change. Suddenly, everybody wanted an orca, and Puget Sound became the world's source of supply. And so, believe it or not, we had entered what is known as the capture era, when 1/3 of the pods were taken and sent to aquariums all over the world in planes. And it used to be you could be walking down Alaska Avenue by the location of the aquarium and see an orca being lifted in a sling to be put on a truck, to be taken down to Boeing Field, to be shipped to SeaWorld. It's hard to imagine this today, but that was normal. There were pictures of this in the Seattle Times, and nobody thought anything of it. And ultimately, though, people's opinions started to change because they saw these orcas and they realized that not only was Namu not vicious, but he was intelligent, and he was wholly present as an intellect and as an animal to be reckoned with. And so tide started to change. People really began to believe that this orca hunting should be shut down. And it was. Back then, 3 Republicans actually joined together to end forever the whale hunting that was going on in Puget Sound. That was Dan Evans, first governor of Washington and then U.S. Senator, still with us today. Ralph Monroe, the many times elected Secretary of the State Secretary. And then, of course, the late Slade Gorton. The 3 of them got together and just ended whale hunting in Washington waters forever. And that was in 1976, really quite recently. But sadly, there's only one survivor of that era today, and she's still in the Miami Aquarium. Her name is Toketai, and she's been there for more than 50 years. This is a totem pole that was carved for her by carvers at the Lummi Nation. And what you see here are people laying hands on this totem pole, blessing it. They're about to be taken on a journey all the way down to Miami to try to really create awareness of Tokutai and her continuing captivity and to urge her release. The Miami Seaquarium would not see the Lummi delegation, and so what they did was set up a loudspeaker across the street from the Seaquarium and play orca calls for Tokutai. One of the most interesting pieces of reporting in the book, I think, is the account of what happened when a reporter for Dateline NBC went down to see Tokutai. They wouldn't let me go see her. They don't allow that. I asked and asked and asked because I really wanted to see her and talk to her vet and all that stuff. They always said no. But this one reporter did go quite a long time ago, and he took recordings of L-pod calls with him. And he described how he turned on the recorder and she came racing across the tank and just pointed her head at the recorder and just wanted to hear it and hear it and hear it. So she's still down there. And the Seaquarium says she's better off there because, after all, look at her relations facing endangerment in Puget Sound. We'll see what happens. The other thing that we did was we went out while we were still going after this story of the orcas and what was the problem, why were they not doing well. We went out to sea with NOAA on their Primo research vessel, which is called the Shimada. We went out onto the Pacific and cruised on the outer shelf for a week. And we were joining scientists there who were really looking into what was going on with the juvenile salmon. When they first come out of the Columbia River and they ride that river plume out into the ocean, what happens to those fish? Why aren't they doing well? Why aren't they fattening up? I mean, a little baby's fish's job when they first head out to sea is to get fat fast. Basically, bigger than a bird's beak is the job, as quickly as possible. And so on this cruise, the scientists were dragging a net through the surface of the water and basically bringing in anything they could find to see what was the assemblage of species, what was there in the water. And this herring was one of the fish that came up in the net. And you can see how beautiful these fish are when they first come in from the sea. I mean, the beauty of fish is greatly underrated. The colors, the glimmer, the shimmer, the shine, and the mystery that's in their eye. But these herring, they're part of this whole overlooked tribe of fish called forage fish, which are incredibly important to the orcas. If you care about orcas, you really need to care about forage fish. These are herring, sand lance, and other little fish. They're, this long, and when they're young, they're even smaller. In other words, just the right size for a baby salmon to eat. So these forage fish are feeding the salmon that feed the orcas. There's this old saying in Coast Salish country, little fish feed big fish, feed blackfish. So, one of the things that was really driven home for me in the reporting about why are the orcas hungry, they're hungry because they're not getting enough salmon to eat. What's the problem for the salmon? Well, one of the problems is all these habitat changes that we've made, including hardening of the near shore, so that you don't have the natural beaches that forage fish need for spawning and for laying their eggs. So it's all connected. The uplands, the beaches, the near shore, the estuaries, the rivers, these are all part of a healthy living ecosystem that support the orcas. So then it was time to come back home and look at Puget Sound and ask ourselves the question, all right, Central Puget Sound, that's where the orcas come in winter. It's where most of us live. What are the changes that we've made that are depressing the salmon runs such that these orcas aren't doing well? What are the changes in the water quality such that when they do get a salmon, there are these enduring pollutants in the fish that can affect their health? The orcas are really affected by three main threats. The first is food, lack of regularly available quality food. Second, there's too much noise. The water is just full of ferries and ships and container ships and boats and fishermen and whale watch tours, basically us, everywhere they turn around. And orcas catch their food by sound. They hunt in the dark by sound. They have a very sophisticated kind of biosonar called echolocation. And they have to be able to hear a very quiet little click of their radar coming back from the swim bladder of a fish. And that's how they tell what species it is. If it's got the right shaped swim bladder, they know that's a chinook, and that's a fish they're going to go after. And it's not easy. They have to really chase that fish. They have to dive as deep as 1,000 feet and twist and turn and accelerate and decelerate and get it out of a hole and bounce it off a wall. I mean, it's a real struggle. And chinook don't school, so they have to chase them down one by one. So anything that makes that harder, such as noise, masking that sound that they need to hear, that's a real problem for them. And then furthermore, if that fish is small, or that fish is carrying a lot of pollutants, it's not going to feed that orca well. And if the orca hasn't had enough to eat, just like us, it will burn its fat, which is where the toxins are stored. So it's too much noise, too few fish, and then the fish are carrying pollutants. Those are the three main threats facing the orcas in our waters. There are only 73 left. That's a really small number. That's as small as 40 years ago after the capture era. So they're not recovering. We're not getting where we need to go. Here's why. So it's one of those double-edged swords. You know, you can look at that and say, okay, fine. If you look at that from a salmon's perspective, that's not good. We have turned this beautiful landscape into the largest, the second largest shipping depot on the West Coast. I mean, this is the Kent Valley. And what used to be farmland today is in Tukwila is home to all these warehouses. And that's the Green River in a jacket of levees, a cement jacket of levees all the way down to where it meets the Duwamish and enters into what's now an industrial shipping channel. So, you know, if you're a salmon and you need cold, clean water, this paved bike trail in a levee without any trees is exactly what's bad for you. I mean, there's no shade, it's too hot. You don't have the delicious little insects and leaf litter raining down from the trees to feed you. You don't have any nice deep hidey holes to hide in. You don't have the things that make a river a river. And so, you know, the good side of this is it's pretty clear what the problem is, right? And I have to laugh at that when I say that, because you think, well, why is that good? Well, it's good because we know what the problem is. There's so many big issues facing us today where we don't even know what to do. Well, in this case, we know what to do. It's as simple as cold, clean water running downhill, and it works every time. I mean, if we fix the rivers that support the salmon and the forests that keep the rivers cool, well, then you get more salmon, and then you have more for the orcas to eat. And this is the Green River, just a little higher upstream. And what's going on here is the King County Flood District and the King County Council and other partners have put a lot of money into pulling out and moving back levee walls and also replanting streams and making this a more natural river. There's still a lot more work to do in the Green. There's no fish passage at the Howard Hansen Dam, which is a major flood control structure. It's one of the reasons we're not flooding right now in Auburn, because of the Howard Hansen Dam. But it was built without any fish passage, which means fully half of the Green River watershed and all of the best of it is not accessible to coho or chinook or steelhead. We've known this for a long time. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has regarded that as a jeopardy finding against the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and told them to get fish passage built at the Howard Hansen Dam. And they started, and then they blew their budget, and then it had to go back and do another budget, and so there's still no fish passage at the Howard Hansen Dam. So, you know, we can make this better, but it takes setting priorities and sticking to them and executing. This is California. We went to California as our last stop in the journey of the orcas to understand what was going on for them down there. You know, people call them the southern residents for a reason. We forget that they forage all the way down to San Francisco Bay for their fish. And the Sacramento River used to be the second largest producer of salmon in North America. It's hard to remember that. A lot of people have even forgotten that California is a salmon state. And when you look at this picture, it's easy to see why. This is San Francisco Bay. We're about to land in our Alaska Airlines flight to start our trip. And I said, Steve, you've got to take that picture. And I like to show this to Washington and Seattle audiences to say, you know, we're not here yet. We don't yet have this level of development, this level of population pressure. It's not too late here at all. I mean, you know how it is when you come back here from any place and you feel so incredibly relieved. It's like, oh, it's still so beautiful. We have trees and mountains and rivers and wild animals. Very true. California, everything happened first and worst for salmon in California because of the gold rush. There was just an incredible destruction of the riparian habitat from mining, and also the loss of native cultures that were exterminated, pushed out of the way. It was a very, very dangerous and desperate time for native people and for native wildlife. And today, the Sacramento River, it heats up terribly because the Shasta Dam, 600 feet tall on the Sacramento River, sits there without any fish passage, and a lot of the water is siphoned out of the Sacramento for agriculture in California, and also to send it to the cities to the south. Most of the water is in the mountains to the north, and the water is sent away to the south in some of the biggest interbasin transfers you can possibly imagine. And so where does this leave the winter run chinook? This is a unique run of chinook in the world, and they come back to the Sacramento River. They stage and begin to return to the river in the wintertime. That's why they're called that. But they don't make their spawning run until the summer. And so here they are stuck in the Central Valley floor below the Shasta Dam in the middle of the summer, and the water gets incredibly hot. They used to go up to the volcanic springs of the high mountains in Mount Shasta and do just fine, but they can't get there now. And we went out, we spent this 105-degree day with a biologist looking at these returning chinook, and, you know, it was quite sad. We did see a few on their redds just hanging in the water, exhausted after their spawning nest had been dug, just really waiting to die. And after this baking hot day with this biologist talking about this, you know, nearly extinct run of salmon in a place that's also being overrun by wildfire, it all felt very apocalyptic. Steve and I went to this restaurant at the end of the day just to get some dinner, and we had a salad and about 6 glasses of water. And the waitress took my credit card. She said, "Oh, Seattle Times, what are you doing down here?" And I said, "Oh, well, we're here doing a story about orcas and salmon." And she said, "Oh, well, I don't get cable, so I don't know anything about that." And I thought, well, you know, how sad is that? They're right here. They come all the way here to, you know, these coastal waters, and they're right here in your river. But that's the point, isn't it? It's awareness. You know, we still have that awareness here in Washington state of ourselves as salmon people, and that every river is a salmon river. And yeah, I think as long as we have that awareness and we insist on that future, we can make some changes. And I think that, you know, there is real reason for hope. I mean, this is 25, she's the oldest orca, and she's my totem animal. You know, she's been out there since 1928, which is when she was born, we think, which makes her old indeed. She was born before any of the dams on the Columbia or Snake River were built. She was born back when the population of Washington State was about 1.5 million people, and she's still out there feeding her family. She's still out there persisting during this time of immense ecological change. So that shows you what these animals are capable of. You know, she's still out there catching salmon and sharing them with her family. And here's one of the J-pod whales who's had one of the 5 babies that have been born in the last 3 years. This is spectacular. You know, when Telequa had her calf, that was the first baby that had been born to these southern resident killer whales in many years. And then all of a sudden we had this little tiny boomlet of babies. And there are 3 mothers out there to be right now who are very, very pregnant, and who knows, maybe we could have some more calves. So, you know, these animals, I think in many ways it's about us really just giving them what they need. They can take care of the rest, and they're actually still persisting in spite of it all. I think for me, the thing that is so inspiring about these animals is just exactly that persistence. You know, this is an incredible species. I know people have said to me, "Oh, aren't they afraid of you when they see you out there in a boat?" And it's like, are you kidding me? This is an animal that can burst swim 35 miles an hour. It weighs tons and tons. incredibly powerful and charismatic, and I just think that, whatever we can do to make sure that they're always here for the future, we ought to do. And likewise, the salmon. I mean, this is an animal that's radiated into every possible habitat since the Pleistocene. And, they're always finding their way into new places, new habitats. The Tahlequah River is a great example of this. We made the decision as a country in 1992 to do the world's biggest dam removal ever on the Tahlequah River and take down 2 dams that were built in the early 1900s without any fish passage. That was 10 years ago today, and there are now 8,000 chinook salmon heading back to the Tahlequah River. Not only that, but all these other animals that depend on chinook salmon are also doing better. Even songbirds that eat coho eggs and the insects that feed on salmon carcasses, such as the dipper, which is this beautiful songbird that you've probably seen in Puget Sound rivers. And the females today are bearing double clutches. They don't even migrate, and they're bigger in body size since more salmon started coming back. There are more eagles. It's just a place that's really been reset, and it's a spectacular return to life. And Washington's newest beach is at the mouth of the Tahlequah. All that sediment that used to be penned up behind the dams today is down on Washington's newest beach and in the near shore, where once again there's a crab fishery. It's really quite a spectacular transformation, and we're only in the first 10 years. So change is possible. And these are the sorts of changes that we can and do make and just need to do more of. So with that, I'm going to ask my lovely assistant to play the video that I've got for you. This is a video that I actually took with my iPhone out on Puget Sound one day when I was out in a research boat with Brad Hansen from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And what's going on here is, this is really just about this time 2 years ago, November, and the JK and L pods of orcas were all here. And it was the first time the 3 pods had been together in Puget Sound country, and it was very exciting. I got a call from Brad Hansen in the newsroom. He said, "Hey, Lynda, the orcas are here, and we're going to go out and do some health surveys. Do you want to come along?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, of course I do." So Steve and I and Ramon Dampour, the videographer, went out and met Brad in West Seattle at the boat ramp and hopped in a Zodiac, and we went out, and this is what we saw. I mean, right here in downtown Seattle. This is right off the west side of, the east side of Vashon Island, and these orcas are just headed towards Elliott Bay. And I think one of the things that always surprises me when I'm with the orca whales is how beautiful they are, and the sound of their breath. It's a sound like from the beginning of the world. And how playful they are. They goof around a lot. They swim along underwater backwards just for fun. They whap their tail like this one is and that one is, seemingly just for fun. I think they just like to hear the sound. It's just a wonder. And it's a wonder that we never, ever want to end. I mean, downtown orcas, who's got that? I'm going to read to you just a little from the book as you watch the film. The southern resident orcas still seek the fish returning to Puget Sound rivers, surging even all the way into the urban waters offshore of downtown Seattle, hunting chum, coho, and chinook. The special time for Seattle area residents is when the southern residents, in their final seasonal rounds of the year, come here at last. Downtown orcas, who else has that? Sometimes the southern residents are here for days on end, thrilling ferry riders crisscrossing central Puget Sound, and people flocking to beaches all over West Seattle and Vashon and Maury Islands to watch orcas blow and breach right offshore. One day in November 2018, JK and L pods were all here at once. Dozens of orcas were cartwheeling and spy hopping right past the Superfund site of the Asarco smelter at Ruston near Tacoma, right past the dense packed housing along the long ago logged off hillsides. They sculled underwater upside down, their bellies glowing white through the green water, and slapped their pectoral fins and flukes. seemingly just for fun, or maybe simply to hear the loud, resonant, smacking sound. As the sunset painted the water gold, people thronged the beaches and shorelines and chanted all over again at what it means to live here in a place still alive with salmon and orcas on the hunt. The southern resident orcas that roam the region's urban waters are like black and white robed judges of a truth and reconciliation commission. They remind us all of what is still here and what is at risk, what we took for ourselves, what we took from them. Their hunger is an indictment because we caused it. Their hunger points to what's missing. At stake, as the region gets richer, is whether it also will get poorer, with only the grandmother orcas remembering the salmon that used to be. And with that, I'm very happy to take your questions. Thank you very much for being here. I also want to tell you about my flowers. So this is a lei, and it was dropped around my neck by Cindy at Visu. Cindy, would you stand up for just a second? Cindy is a third grade teacher up in Shoreline and in a public school, and she's been really one of the greatest friends of the orcas and of my work since it all started. Back when I was doing Hostile Waters, I first started hearing from Cindy, and I went out to her classroom and discovered that all of the kids had made little orcas that they hung from the lights. And, she's also been a friend to me during the time that I was writing the book. Her kids from the class would send me cards that I'd put up. I was staying at Friday Harbor Labs when I wrote most of the book, which was a wonderful experience. And then tonight when I walked in, she dropped this beautiful orchid lei around my neck because her husband, John, just got back from Seattle. So, writers move in pods too, and we appreciate support. So with that, I do want to take your questions. Go ahead, I'm here for you.
Well, thank you so much, Lynda. I'm going to actually read them out to you from over here. Hi, everyone. My name's Candace. I'm one of the event managers here at Town Hall. We do have a couple questions, but I'm happy to take more if you would like to submit more. So the first one, with the story of Tahlequah holding onto her calf for so long, did she understand her calf was gone, and do orcas comprehend grief or experience grief?
Right, so the question was, when she was carrying that calf, did Telequa understand that the calf was dead? And do orcas comprehend what's happening to them now? And I don't think there's any doubt whatsoever that she knew that the calf was gone. I'm sure she knew that. And as a matter of fact, I think all the other members of her pod knew that too. I mean, let's remember they have that echolocation ability. They can see inside the swim bladder of a salmon. That means they can see inside her. They knew she was pregnant all this time. And they knew, and they stayed with her. It was very interesting. She was really kept company by the other orcas in the pod the whole time she was carrying the baby. They stayed with her. It was really a procession watching them going through the water together. And so I'm sure she knew what had happened. I'm sure they knew what had happened. And I'm sure they know what's going on now. I mean, I think we're past the time when people thought animals didn't have intelligence, that they were just sort of animals of rote instinct. And I think we all understand that these are intelligent animals. We know that their brain, as a proportion of their body, is bigger than almost any other animal. It's not only large, it's very, very complex with many, many, many folds and intricacies. They have portions of their brain that we don't even have. We don't even know what it's for. We just know we don't have it. The portions of their brain that are particularly large have to do with empathy, which is interesting because you think about how they treat one another, the way they stick together through thick, thin, lifelong. And their lives are quite long. I mean, look at the oldest matriarch. She's in her 90s. And she's still caring for all the others in the pod, still sharing food, still checking in. I mean, it's remarkable. These really are societies and families. And I'm sure that Tahlequah knew what had happened to her, and I think these whales know what's happening to them. I mean, I often think to myself, when a whale like L25 is going all the way down to the outer coast of California to get those winter chinook that are now so very, very rare. You know, is she getting any fish, or is she just working off a memory of fish? Because that's where her grandmother taught her to go. And that can be the real problem for these animals, where they have this deep ecological memory that's been taught to them by prior generations, and they go there and things have changed. The fish are no longer there. It's not that they aren't capable of adapting. They do. I've told you about how they're now primarily on the outer coast in the summer rather than in the Salmon Islands. But I wonder if, you know, is it for them a little like it is for us? You know, I get so many calls from all kinds of people talking about a place they used to love to go fishing in Puget Sound or on the Skagit River, you know, to get some big slab-sided chinook and put in the smoker. Or they'll talk about how they used to wiggle flounder right out of the sand with their grandfather, you know. And I think to myself, if the orcas spoke in a language that we could understand, are they saying the same thing? I used to come here with my grandmother. There were so many fish. What happened?
This next question, do you think you would have been as passionate about orcas if you weren't based in the Pacific Northwest? And what other species pique your interest?
So the question was, would I have been passionate about the orcas if I didn't live in the Pacific Northwest? And what was the second half?
What other species pique your interest?
Oh, what other species pique my interest? Well, each and every one. Look, I mean, I'll level with you. I was one of those weird kids, right, that was always outside. And I was fortunate to grow up in a place with 7 acres of woods and a frog pond. And my mom said to me every morning, go outside and find something to do. And, you know, every picture of me as a kid, I have a black eye and I'm covered with calamine lotion and I'm in my Girl Scout shorts and I have my Captain Crunch cereal whistle around my neck with a string. And it was heaven. It was just great. And it turned me into a naturalist at a very early age in the most amateur sense of the word. And the root of the word amateur, of course, is love. And that's what it was all about for me. It was the love and fascination of seeing a firefly light on my knee or hear a frog gronking away in some dank little rocky corner of the pond and, you know, go find it and look at it and watch its golden eyes blink. And it just, you know, here in the Pacific Northwest, the orcas, they captivate us all because they are so spectacular and charismatic. And the salmon, I don't happen to fish, but I see the salmon really as symbols of how our region is doing in terms of its ecological health. And likewise, the orcas. You know, if they're doing well, probably we're doing well. And if the salmon are doing well, we're probably doing well. And the obverse is also true. But, you know, there isn't a species that doesn't thrill me. Last night, I was spending quite a lot of time watching a spider in my house. And telling him, you know, you've got to work on that part of the web over there, you know. I've got some geraniums in the house, and a cross spider came in on one of the pots, and so it's now got this whole elaborate little ecosystem going with its web and my geraniums, and you know, the little insects get caught in there, and so I've got my little November wild kingdom going right in the house. So, you know, I think we are so fortunate to live in a planet that we get to share with this vast intelligence, as my writer friend Lynda V says in her books. It's so true, isn't it? You know, these animals that are beyond words in the sense that they have a kind of intelligence that our words can't even begin to capture. So it's all good, and out here we're so fortunate to still keep company with all these animals.
Can you recommend, I think it's supposed to be an NGO that can help the orcas and their habitat. Can you recommend one that you support?
Right, so the question was, can I recommend an NGO, a nonprofit that is helping out with the orcas? I get asked this all the time, and frankly, I hate to answer it because there's so many, and they're all working hard, and they have their different niche, and so I would say it really depends on what your passion is. If you want to fund science, you know, there are these all sorts of fantastic science-based research nonprofits, such as Wild Orca, with Deborah Giles, who is a scientist that I worked with out on the boats many times, writing these articles, doing this book. Rob Williams at Oceans Initiatives, based right here in Seattle. It's a science nonprofit. But there are other fantastic NGOs. If what you want to do is get your hands dirty and plant a tree or work on salmon recovery, these local salmon recovery enhancement groups, they're just terrific. I mean, they're out there in our local watershed figuring out what a salmon need and working on getting it, whether it's taking out shoreline armoring or, I mean, this is the thing. I guess I would say that individual action is really important and we all should take individual actions, but ultimately we're at the level now, whether it's climate or saving salmon and orcas, where what we really need is governmental level change and money to pay for it. I mean, I come from New York where we have this really useful thing. It's called taxes. And, public health, education, wildlife conservation, it comes in handy, let me tell you. And here in Washington, orca and salmon compete with everything else for funding. And, they need a dedicated fund for habitat repair. Every biologist I talk to, every policy person I talk to, federal or state, talks about this. I mean, we're at the point now of these $100 million projects for taking down dams, taking out shoreline armoring, restoring estuaries. And, there's just a lot of stuff out there on the landscape that was built in the early 1900s that we don't even need anymore. It's just in the way. And dam removal has, really changed from what was thought of as this like radical, crazy, lunatic, antisocial thing to do to a community problem-solving tool. I can give you an example. The Nooksack River, just a summer ago, the city of Bellingham realized that it was going to cost them more to fix the dam that had been placed a water diversion 100 years earlier than to just buy water from Snohomish County. So that's what they did. They partnered with American Rivers, and the Washington State Legislature put in $10 million. The Telequa tribes put in money. American Rivers provided technical expertise, and they took the dam out. And now chinook have access to the upper watershed for the first time in 100 years. So this is the kind of thing that's going on all over Washington, and will continue to go on all over the country because a lot of infrastructure was built 100 years ago, and it's falling apart. And now we also, in a situation like the Elwha, can see the tremendous benefit of what happens if we let the fish have what the fish need. There's a lot more coming. I mean, the Klamath, which is a river that runs from eastern Oregon all the way down to Northern California, they're taking 4 dams out of the Klamath beginning in 2023. This will be the world's largest ever dam removal, and it's going to open 400 miles of spawning habitat. So big and small, here, there, everywhere. This is the kind of large-scale work that's underway and there needs to be more of. So yes, individual action, number one, for yourself, so you can feel you're doing something and also be an example, but it really will take these community scale, government scale efforts and money to pay for them to really move the needle for salmon and orca. And this is where you come in. I mean, this is when you get out your pen and your envelope and your stationery and your stamp, and you write an actual real letter to Patty Murray or Maria Cantwell or Jay Inslee or your state legislators. And believe me, if they're just like us. If they get an actual real letter from a real person, they're stunned. It has an outsized impact. So use your voice, vote and be involved.
Well, we have reached time. There are quite a few other questions, but a couple of them are kind of themed on what you think the likelihood is that any of this will be restored, that dams will be taken down, that the salmon population and habitats will be restored, and what gives you hope for the orca's recovery?
Oh, 100%. I don't have any doubt about it at all because we're doing it now, and we just need to do more. Right? And every time we do it, it works. So I think if anything, I want people to leave tonight feeling empowered and clear about this. This is not some mystery. What do? We know exactly what to do. It's kind of like the Marine Mammal Protection Act, which we passed in the 1970s. And today there are more porpoises and whales and humpback whales and gray whales and seals and sea lions than there were in our parents' generation. Why? Because we stopped killing them. It works every time. Well, this is a little similar. The capture era ended 40 years ago, though, so that tells us that that's not enough. We also need to make sure they have the same thing we need, which is something to eat and somewhere to be. So, you know, for the salmon, they need what salmon need, cold, clean water running downhill, so that they can go be a nice, succulent, delicious, fat, juicy meal for an orca.
Well, thank you so much, Lynda, for your presentation tonight. It's been really great. I know I didn't know that orcas lived as long as that, so that's really fun to know. And thank you all so much for your questions. There are more on here, but I think Lynda's going to stick around a little bit, so if you want to ask them to her directly, you're welcome to. The Elliott Bay book sales table is right over here, and I believe Mountaineers has some material for you to check out as well. Thanks so much for coming.
I'm going to slide on over to the signing table.